business that says, "It is hereby created and established the Overtown Advisory Board, Overtown Community Oversight Board, to be known as the Overtown Community Oversight Board, to encourage and support housing, job creation, economic and business development, educational opportunities, and historic and cultural preservation." Now, the next sentence is critical. The board shall. Now, that doesn't mean may. That doesn't mean might. That doesn't mean can. That doesn't mean will. That means shall. In the law, that's the strongest guidance for what's to happen. It's not a choice. Shall. The lawyers for the city chose to put the word shall in because that means you must do this. The board shall provide written recommendations. Written recommendations. You shall provide written recommendations to the city commission regarding activities, developments, and improvements within or substantially impacting the residents of the Overtown area. Let me say that again. You as a board shall provide written recommendations to the city commission regarding activities, development, and improvements within or substantially impacting the residents of the Overtown area. And what's important is that this was amended to read this way, because before what it read was that you were supposed to comment regarding all city-funded or assisted activities. Before, it used to say all city-funded or assisted activities, and that was deleted from the law. And so what I'm saying to you is, by my clear reading of your charter passed by the city council, that is your responsibility not to just advise the city on city budget matters where the city spends money, but you shall provide written comments, written recommendations to the city commission regarding activities, developments, and improvements within or substantially impacting the residents of the Overtown area. And that's where you get jurisdiction over all actions of the CRA. You can't change them, and you can't direct to the CRA, but you can report to the city commission your feelings about not only the CRA, but any other action that affects the residents of Overtown. And that's nothing I made up. That comes from what the city attorney prepared and what the city commission approved. Let's turn to the next page. Assignment of tasks. This is where Tyrone comes in. And he's really going to appreciate this, because it says the city manager shall. Now, it doesn't say will, may, can, should. It says shall. That means, under the law, the city manager has no choice. He shall. The city manager shall, what is he supposed to do? Provide for necessary staffing to assist the Overtown Community Oversight Board. What is your responsibility that he shall provide the staff to do? Well, it's the city manager's responsibility as a must, shall do, to provide the ability for you to provide written recommendations to the city commission regarding activities, developments, and improvements within or substantially impacting the residents of the Overtown area. So your job is to comment on everything, and his job is to provide, put it in writing for you to approve, to then send on to the city commission about the city council about everything that affects the people in Overtown. If you look at number 2, what is the city manager supposed to do as far as providing you staff? Work with other city departments, public agencies, and private groups as required to provide information to the Overtown Community Advisory Board on activities, developments, or improvements in or substantially impacting the residents of the Overtown area. So each meeting you should have a substantial agenda package of all activities, developments, or improvements in or substantially impacting the residents, all new ones and updates on the previous ones. So every project or program that impacts the residents of Overtown, the staff to this board should be giving you an agenda package that outlines the new impacts and the update on the previous ones so that you can prepare written recommendations to the city. Shall. So you are the most powerful board in the city, on paper. Okay. Number 6, coordinate the research, development, and preparation of reports and policies for projects initiated by the Overtown Community Oversight Board. That means that if you decide that you want to know something, or you want to report, or you want to investigate, the city manager shall provide the staff to actually allow you to do that. That relates to all projects, programs, and so on that affect the residents of Overtown. This is what your ordinance says. You are the most powerful board in the city of Miami. Go to 10. What is the staff that has to be provided? This is not may, must, whatever. Shall. The city manager shall provide you staff to do what? Number 10. Follow through with the implementation of all decisions and actions approved by the Overtown Community Oversight Board. Well, that means you're supposed to be making decisions. What kind of decisions? What are your bylaws? What are you going to be doing? You actually have a role to actually say yay or nay as far as recommendations. You can't stop or approve. You have no police power regulatory authority, but you have the ability to tell those 5 people who sit on the dais what you think that you should be doing, and you have the ability to demand from the city manager adequate staff to give you all the information you need to make the decision. It's not a may, it's not a maybe, it is a shall. The city manager shall provide you with the staff and the resources to do all of these things, which this ordinance says you have the authority to do. Let's go to 15. The city manager shall provide you with the staff resources to coordinate with the Southeast Overtown Park West Community Redevelopment Agency to relate its activities to the community redevelopment organizations, public agencies, and private business sector. That's everything they do, I think, publicly. So you get the authority to get the staff that you need to meet with the staff of the CRA to do this coordination activity. And then finally, you get the staff to coordinate the activities with the activities of the Southeast Overtown Park West Community Redevelopment Agency and the Overtown Net Administrator's Office. This is pretty powerful stuff. And then let's go out to the last page where we're talking about the Overtown Community Oversight Board is hereby authorized to review and recommend to the City Commission approval with conditions, or disapproval of activities, developments, or improvements in or substantially impacting the residents of the Overtown area. You had the authority to review and comment on all aboard. The supper club, the improvements to the restaurant. You had the ability to ask for staff to allow you to get the information that would allow you to comment on all of that. You are hereby authorized to require submission to the Overtown Community Oversight Board of any information requested by the board to evaluate the activities, developments, or improvements, including eminent domain, in or substantially impacting the residents of the Overtown area. Now it says require. Now that doesn't mean subpoena, but that means require the city manager to provide you with the resources to be able to provide you with the information that you request to make the decisions that you are allowed or mandated to do under your enabling legislation, so that you can provide written comments, because you're going to get the staff to prepare the written comments. You need a huge staff, because that's what you're to do. You are actually mandated by law to comment on anything affecting the residents of Overtown. That's pretty important. Pretty important. And then, number 3, recommend from time to time to the City Commission and the Southeast Overtown Park West Community Redevelopment Agency modifications or amendments to the Southeast Overtown Park West Community Redevelopment Plan. So you have the authority to get the information to determine whether the text of the redevelopment plan of the Southeast Overtown Park West Community Redevelopment Agency should be amended. He should be very glad that he has all of this new staff, because none of this comes from the TIF budget. It comes from, but figuring it's Miami, it'll ultimately come from the TIF budget because the city manager will figure out to pay for it that way. Now, I actually read your minutes, and it actually reminded me of an incident I had with my younger daughter when she was really young. We went to New York City, and we went into some fancy hotel. We were visiting somebody, and we walked into the elevator, and I'm holding her hand, and the woman in the elevator said, "What floor, please?" And I said, 6. And the woman with the white gloves pushed the button 6. To which my daughter looked up at me and said, "Daddy, is this an automatic elevator?" And I said, "Yes." And she said to me, "Well, Daddy, what do we need her for?" And so when I look at your minutes, it reminds me of that story. You have all of this authority, but like the woman in the white gloves pushing the button on the elevator, what do we need you for? Because I don't see where you've done anything that implements the requirements that you have. You have this incredible mandate to be the information provider and to be the better than the staff. You are the impartial experts who've been appointed to this board to evaluate the impact of everything that affects Overtown. And you have the ability to ask the city manager to give you the staff to do that. And I don't see it reflected in your minutes. Now, that's just my opening comment. But as an academic, we first need to get people's attention. Because if you're going to keep them there for 47 minutes when they're hungry, you really need to say some things to get their attention. But I am not exaggerating. The ordinance which establishes you has these mandates and it gives you this authority. So you need to sit down with the mayor and the city manager and say, what's the deal? Are we going to do this, or do we just meet and have a nice conversation and network once a month? Okay. Now, let me move on to just a couple of other things, and then we'll kind of open it up to questions. Everybody, I keep reading in the newspaper about all of these ways we're going to spend the CRA's money. We're going to give it to Tri-Red because they've only got 8 weeks to come up with $46 million, so we're going to give them slum and blight money to build tracks and modify the platform and have ticket kiosks and everything else out of the slum and blight money for Southeast Overtown Park West. What else are we going to use the money for? Oh, there's a whole variety of ways that we can spend this money. We can give it to the developers of the World Center. And what's interesting is if you went to the meeting between Christmas and New Year's, you realize that there was no presentation by World Center, no presentation by staff, no discussion of the project. And what's interesting is that the project had been approved by the city because the city has the regulatory authority to approve the project. The CRA has no police power regulatory authority. They can't give you a permit for anything. The CRA's only responsibility in that meeting was to discuss an incentive package. And the developer made no case that but for the CRA money, it wouldn't be able to build the project. In fact, Commissioner Sarnoff made it quite clear that the discussion should focus not on what the CRA was doing for the developer, but on what the developer was doing for the CRA. And so since the developer was building the project and generating new taxes, the argument was that we should give him some back as a reward. Now, if I was building my home in Miami-Dade County and I was generating taxes from what was a vacant lot, do you think that the city would and the county would entertain giving me half of my taxes back on my new single-family home? Those taxes belong to the taxpayers of Miami-Dade County, not to me. Anyway, we've had a variety of different proposals. My God, we wanted to set up a CRA for the pine redlands near Miami Zoo so that we could subsidize the rape of the endangered species. The taxpayers of Miami-Dade County, unincorporated area, were going to subsidize the infrastructure development to allow that area that had been so abused by slumlords. And you know who the slumlords are in the Pinewoods area? The University of Miami and the federal government, who allowed the property to deteriorate to such a state that a finding of necessity said they're blighted. The University of Miami, 30 years ago from the federal government, got a gift of property for a southern campus, restricted for 30 years. The 30 years go by, they sell it for $20 million, and they so abuse the property in that period that it's blighted. And they want to use taxpayer dollars to allow it to be developed, because the only way to save it is to develop it. That is logic. The only way to save it is to develop it. All of a sudden we hear that we are going to use CRA money to assemble land and build an extension of the Metro Mover so that county employees can leave County Hall and get to the soccer game. And we're going to use CRA money by setting up a new CRA for Little Havana. But we're not going to do any housing. We're only going to build the People Mover, and we're going to assemble land for the soccer stadium. That's what we're going to use it for. Okay, now, the argument that a CRA is an economic development agency is flat out wrong. The state of Florida defines economic development agencies because that's critical. An economic development agency is an agency where if I'm a developer and I've got pro formas and I've got trade secrets and I want to go to Leroy here and say, I want you to look at this and give me incentives. If I give this to the city's economic development officer, it's exempt from sunshine. If I give it to Clarence Wood at the CRA, any citizen can ask for any piece of paper about the World Center deal. You can walk in and say, give me your files, I want to look at it. It is not exempt. Every piece of paper that is in the CRA, you can ask for. Notes, phone logs, tweets, personal email that was used for business purposes. You can ask for that from the CRA. It is not an economic development organization at all. Additionally, if you want to see what an economic development organization is, and you want to see how effective they can be, take a look at, when they talk about an economic incentive deal, what Enterprise Florida is required to do under the statute. And I'll provide all of that so you can have it in your minutes for next week. It details something, I would like to say 1,000 times better, but it's more than that better than the deal between World Center and the CRA. The World Center CRA deal, my students could do better. My students could do better. But the staff didn't do it. They had outside lawyers doing it. So I'm not holding staff responsible for any of that.
But you'll give me 5 minutes to
I'll
respond
give you
to
more than
this.
that. I'll give you more than that.
I mean, I act through the chair.
Now, the Community Redevelopment Act, and I'm only using the World Center. There's other deals in Omni, for example. I don't want to single out South or Overtown Park West. When the site of the Performing Arts Center was truly blighted and vacant, the Omni CRA entered into a deal that it would pay $11 million in total cost of building the Arts Center, which is now the Arts Center, Performing Arts Center. It agreed to pay, in its redevelopment plan, $1.3 million a year until the debt service was paid off. That was the deal to alleviate the slum and blight that existed. In the global agreement, the interlocal agreement to fund the baseball stadium, the decision was made that in order to be able to get enough tourist development taxes to fund the baseball stadium debt, they'd have to get the money that was used to subsidize the debt for the Performing Arts Center substituted. And the easiest substitution was the Omni CRA. And so what they did in the global agreement to fund the baseball stadium was they substituted slum and blight money to pay the debt service of a facility that already was built, operational, and in no danger of default. And it wasn't 1.3 that they were substituting, it's 35% of the annual payment from the county and the city of the slum and blight money to substitute for the debt service on the Performing Arts Center so they can take the tourist taxes and use it to pay for the debt service on the baseball stadium. So that's what we used slum and blight money. We took a commitment of 1.3, a legitimate slum and blight, and we substituted for now almost $6 million of slum and blight money to support a facility which was built, operational, and in no danger of default. We amended the CRA boundary to go south of 395 to spend slum and blight money on the improvement of Museum Park to get rid of the remediation. We annexed an area that had no taxable property. And I'm not saying that the decision to do that was good or bad, because you're providing, you're remediating blight, obviously. You provided for the support of the two museums. But what's interesting is that the rich people who promised that if you got the money from the county, you wouldn't see us at the trough anymore to get money to run this museum. And yet last year, because the donors did not meet their commitment, the Omni CRA was asked for $1 million of slum and blight money to subsidize the operational costs of a county building which isn't even allowed under the statute. So I'm not picking on Southeast Overtown Park West. And I could pick on Homestead, or I could pick on Daytona Beach, or any. The real question here goes back to what's an appropriate use of slum and blight money, and what does the statute really say? Why is it that this pot of money is looked at by the politicians as the easiest source to fund something? Why is it that everybody thinks that it's appropriate to take Omni money that's meant to alleviate slum and blight and provide for affordable housing and use it to enhance and fix the turnstiles and the track so Tri-Rail can come into the board? Section 335 of the 163.335 of the Redevelopment Act basically talks about the findings and declarations of necessity. This is the findings that must be made in order to be able to have a CRA, and it's the state's recognition of why we have CRAs. It is hereby found and declared that there exists in counties and municipalities of the state and slum and blighted areas, and I think each of the board members has this, which constitute a serious and growing menace injurious to the public health, safety, and morals and welfare of the residents of the state, and the existence of such areas contributes substantially and increasingly to the spread of disease and crime, constitutes an economic and social liability, imposing onerous burdens which decrease the tax base, reduce tax revenue, substantially impair and arrest sound growth, retard the provision of affordable housing accommodations, aggravate traffic problems, substantially hamper and elimination of traffic hazards, and improvement of traffic facilities. That the prevention and elimination of slums and blight is a matter of state policy and state concern, in order that the state and its counties and municipalities shall not continue to be endangered by areas which are focal centers of disease, promote juvenile delinquency, and consume an excessive proportion of its revenues because of its extra services required by police, fire, accident, hospitalization, and other forms of public protection services and facilities. It is further found and declared that there exists in counties and municipalities of the state a severe shortage of affordable housing to residents of low and moderate income, including the elderly, and that the existence of such conditions affects the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of such counties and municipalities and retards their growth and economic and social development, and that the elimination or improvement of such conditions is a proper matter of state policy, state concern, and is valid and desirable public purpose. Nowhere in it does it say it's okay to subsidize performing arts centers or art museums.
Or trains.
Finding of necessity. This is the key. In order to designate a specific area, a CRA, No county, 163-355, no county or municipality shall exercise the community redevelopment authority conferred by this part until after the governing body has adopted a resolution supported by data and analysis which makes a legislative finding that the conditions in the area meet the criteria of slum and blight. The resolution must state that, one or more slum or blighted areas or one or more areas in which there is a shortage of housing affordable to the residents of low or moderate income, including the elderly, exist in such counties or municipalities, and 2, the rehabilitation, conservation, or redevelopment, or a combination thereof, of such area or areas, including, if appropriate, the development of housing which residents of low and moderate income, including the elderly, can afford, is necessary in the interest of public health, safety, morals, welfare of the residents of such county and municipality. I can go on, but simply, my perspective, as one who reads the statute and one who understands the political realities, is that the law is saying to a place like Miami-Dade County that you have a serious affordable housing problem. And to solve it, you have this tool of a CRA. You to alleviate slum and blight and provide for affordable housing. Now, why do I say that a CRA is not an economic development agency? We have an opinion of the Attorney General about what is appropriate for a CRA to spend money on and give grants for. And it specifically says that a CRA cannot give money to an organization that promotes tourism or is involved with economic development. So if you can't give money to an entity that does economic development, how can you do it yourself? Now, there are substantial economic development organizations that exist in this state, from Enterprise Florida to the Beacon Council to the economic development departments of every single city. When it comes to jobs, there are a myriad of poverty organizations that are involved in job training. They may not be effective in many respects. There are a number of jobs, there are a number of organizations that are focused on jobs. There are federal agencies which give money to the state and to the counties, to entitlement communities to do that task. They don't give it to the CRA. The CRA's responsibility under the law is the alleviation of slum and blight, and in communities that need it, the provision of affordable housing. And you can't tell me that that is not a need in Miami-Dade County. So I think that Tyrone is right. You are the most powerful board in all of Miami-Dade County because you have the authority to ask, and the city manager must provide you the staff to stick your nose in every single activity that affects Overtown. And then I turn around and we'll talk about CRA, a little more about CRAs for a minute, but I look at Miami-Dade County, and I've said this to a number of you. Where is there slum and blight in Miami-Dade County? And the first thing that I hear is Liberty City. Why is there no CRA in Liberty City? Why is there no CRA in Little Havana? Truly there's slum and blighted. Truly there's a need to do all of the things that I just read in the statute. You know, I had serious people call me, judges, to ask me how they could access the CRA money to redo the courthouse. Could they expand the Omni CRA to take in the courthouse? I said, well, first thing is the Southeast Overtown Park West is just above you. But the reality of it is, the politicians, and I will paraphrase a county commissioner who last Monday told me, because there were 3 CRA agenda items on the county commission agenda, is that the elected officials assume that the CRA money is a pot of money to be used for projects. And the elected official in the district for which the project is proposed, be it CRA or whatever, is expecting that the other members of the elected body will support their desire to establish and build a soccer stadium, because even though another elected official on the body would not support it, they support it out of deference because they want to make sure when a project in their district comes up that they will get the respect and the support of those other members. And so the fact that the CRA money is being used to subsidize an amusement park is something that other county commissioners might not support, but they will support it because when they want to do something in their own district, they want that commissioner to support them. Now, I witnessed an amazing change of hats situation in December. When the state of Florida said to charter counties that you can establish a CRA, and in incorporated municipalities you can delegate to that municipality the powers given under 163 with the exception of eminent domain and a few others. And they delegated it to the city of Miami. And the city of Miami, who has the ability to appoint professionals who, in the areas that would relate to the CRA, chose instead to appoint themselves because they wanted to control the money. So they are the Board of Trustees of the CRA. When they serve as a member of the Board of Trustees of the CRA of Miami, whether it's the District of Overtown or Midtown or Omni, it is their fiduciary responsibility to focus only on the CRA. So when you sit as a Board of Trustee members of the CRA, you are not from a district. There are no districts. In fact, you don't even represent any other district. You are not a politician. You're an appointed board member, and your responsibility is only, for example, to Overtown. It doesn't make any difference if you're from Omni or wherever. That's not who you are. You are a CRA board member, and Southeast Overtown is your only responsibility. You wear that hat, and when you convene as the CRA, that is all you worry about, is the issues and problems and solutions for Overtown. In December, when they started talking about who was going to get priority for the jobs that would be created from the World Center project, obviously they should all be concerned primarily with Overtown. What was interesting was that the immediate metamorphosis of Board of Commissioners, without adjourning the meeting, to take on the role of their city council position, representing their district. Because the issue was not how these jobs could be made to benefit the residents of Overtown, how training could be required to make sure the skills were there. No, it was how we could take zip codes in our own elected districts and add them to the list of the people who would be able to get jobs if we couldn't find them at all in Overtown. Think about that. At admission, there aren't enough people in Overtown to fill the jobs, so let's get them from, excuse me, Coconut Grove, Little Havana. And then when they said, wait a minute, the draft that I got is not the draft that I got. The draft I got in the agenda package is not the draft I got before me or the one I saw before. The admission was made that as they speak, the incentive agreement was being amended. And so the document was even amended after the vote was passed, without a presentation of what it was about. But again, this document, called an Economic Incentive Agreement between the CRA and the World Center, is a document that is most appropriate coming from the city during the approval process, because the community benefits come at that point. And at the December meeting held between Christmas and New Year's, the project had already been approved. And every single one of the statements in here to give them $6 million a year is based upon a goal of, a goal of, a goal of. And the reality of it is the enforcement, they're going to get millions, but if they don't comply, they pay a few $100,000 in penalties. But the one overriding factor of this document is that the World Center Agreement has conditions subsequent. The lawyers who drafted this document have language in this document that says that this is not an absolute commitment to pay every year. That unless the CRA board approves the budget, and the city approves the budget, and then the county approves the budget each and every year, then the CRA doesn't have to pay the incentive. It's in the language of this agreement. So it is not an absolute commitment. Now, politically, that doesn't mean that they're not going to approve it every single year. But it just means that the budget has to be approved each and every year 3 times. And what that means is that that may be enough of a legal issue that the effort to bond or finance based upon this agreement will be problematic, because there's no absolute language in here that says each and every year for 30 years the CRA, the city, and the county will approve the budget. I could go on, and
To the chair,
Wait a minute, we're gonna let him finish speaking.
No, I think you finished.
Let me make that clear. Through the chair, we unfortunately do have time constraints. So
let me just conclude.
I would like to let you know how much time you'd like to have for question and answers, because unfortunately we have to adjourn by 6:30.
I will conclude by saying that, I was asked to talk about my perceptions of the World Center project. But in reality, if you take a look at what's currently going on in Overtown, you will see that there's nothing is going on in the World Center, but you will see that there's much more going on than ever has happened before. The financing of affordable housing projects, the infrastructure activity, the redevelopment of the Lyric Theater, the whole block that's going to happen, a lot is occurring. And there is a lot of activity that relates to the improvement of the quality of life. My concern with the language of the incentive agreement to give money to a developer because they're going to have goals to provide employment is not the kind of community benefits agreement that means anything to Overtown. There are so many jobs that are available that are beyond the skill set of the people who live in Overtown. And just saying to an employer that you've got to pay them more, overpay them for a job with the skills that they have, is not right. What you need to do, and I've said this before, if Macy's is going to be a tenant, if Marriott is going to be a tenant, and they're going to come in 2 years, tomorrow they hold a job fair, and tomorrow they hire the staff. And for the next 2 years, they take that Overtown resident and they train them. They put them in another store, they put them in another hotel, and they're an intern. And in 2 years, when the facility opens in Overtown, they're trained, and there's no question of whether it's a drug test or a felon or whatever. They've been working for the company for 2 years. They've been paid for 2 years. And when it comes to working in Overtown, they're able and capable to do it. That's job training. And that's a commitment that you can hold somebody to and then say, we don't want to have a job fair 3 months before you open and not find anybody and have to go to all these zip codes. We want you to take them now and train them and pay them in the internship so that 2 years from now, when your store opens, there's going to not be a question at all. And I want to thank you for all the time that you've given me to speak. I am humbled to be in front of the most powerful board in all of Miami. And I just hope that you take that power and grab it. Because right now, you're about as effective as the woman in the white gloves pushing the elevator button.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Can I get 5 minutes just to respond while the stuff is fresh in his mind?
Not just saying, according to the chair, it's the chair's pleasure.
Right.
Well, yeah,
He already said it.
that we open up the floor to questions and answers.
Well, let me do a little respond.
Chair, before we open up the floor, I would like the board to have the opportunity to ask questions first.
Okay,
But he's already acknowledged it and let me respond. It's going to be 5. I'm going to do it fast because for the most part, my name is Neil Shiver.
Get up here, sir.
And I'm the,
Get up here.
I
So
wanna be on your
people
camera.
can't see your back.
I don't have anything organized. I just want to respond
Well,
to some things. I'm Neil Shiver. I'm the Assistant Director of the Southeast Overtown Parkway CRA. For the most part, I concur with most of the things that Frank said, and all you guys who have a legal background mean I come to a different analysis, but probably the same conclusion. First and foremost, I won't be long because I think we invited an expert, he is an expert, to hear his perspective. You don't buy, you know, everything he sells you don't have to buy, but he's an expert and his credentials speaks for themselves. But we live this every day, folks. First and foremost, there are 2 taxing authorities that contribute money to the CRA Trust Fund. It's the county and the city. Frank is correct, and the county has delegated some, but not all of its authority to the city commission. It retained budgetary powers, which are always powerful. The city commission, in its infinite wisdom, did appoint itself as board of commissioners of the CRA. Please be further advised before you take the wrong action that the CRA and the city are 2 separate entities. The fact that they have the same board members, they are 2 separate entities. So when you deal with them, you deal with them separately. I'll deal with you on bylaws at another meeting, but you all are an advisory board to the city commission. There are some language in your enabling legislation that talks about the Southeast Overtown Parkway CRA. It has to be cleared up. We don't have a problem bringing our projects and giving you information so you all can do your job and make recommendations to the city. But making recommendations to the city and not to the CRA Board of Directors may not put you where you want to be. They're one and the same, but they're 2 separate entities. I have here before you, and I'm not going to give it to you now, is a synopsis of the Miami World Center Economic Development Incentive Agreement I prepared just for this board. It has all the facts in a simple form. The reason I don't want to give it out to you is I don't want you reading it while I'm talking. Right? So that's for the board. It's enough for the whole board, everybody. What I also would talk about, Overtown Foundation, let's clear that up. There was an organization, Overtown, that and some members who created the foundation with the objective of receiving some monies from a couple of developments. The reason that didn't pan out, it has nothing to do with the CRA as much as on the county level, the county commissioner, who still exerts some authority on the Southeast Overtown Parkway CRA because they have final budget approval, decided that she wanted to do it another way. Simple as that, that's the fact. I can talk so much. No, we're not an economic development agency, but we're a community development agency. One of the things that Frank and I spoke about when we had a brief meeting was we're in a very unique situation. Clearly, you can look at the Community Redevelopment Act, and you can look at our redevelopment plan, and you can hold us to the words specifically. You do exactly what the Act says you do. The reason that CRAs was formed in the first place is because municipal cities, particularly the county, and I don't want to name cities, I was going to name them, weren't spending enough resources into our neighborhoods. So the state did come up with a mechanism by which certain funds would be dedicated to places like Overtown, slum, and blight. And so in that light, there was always a resistance, and there always will be, and it always will be a resistance on the city and county level to support CRAs. After all, the money we get, if we didn't get it, will go into their budgets. So, and you have to deal with 13 or 14 individuals in the county on how you divvy the money up. You have to deal with at least 5 or 6 people, and I'm counting the mayors in all these analysis, on the city level. So when you speak of the CRA boards, and you are correct that the focus on the CRA board members should be, and it is, by the way, so don't insinuate otherwise, it is Overtown, and it is Park West. Because it is not about districts, it is about boundaries. And I can tell you, through the chair and through each one of those board members, the focus and the agenda is on Overtown and Park West. The last thing I'm going to say, and I can say so much, let's talk about the jobs, the stratification in the Miami World Center agreement. The stratification I thought was a brilliant legal maneuver. Clearly there is, in our political and legal climate, there are no longer racial set-asides. You can't put things aside for black folks anymore because white folks will sue you. And they will allege discrimination. So I thought it was legally brilliant to say, let's take the zip codes of the highest poverty levels, which usually are your Hispanics and your blacks, without saying it, and let's make that a priority, which passes legal muster, folks. And then what we did was we said, okay, then we'll make the priorities our Overtown. And it is a fact, whether you like it or not, whether you want to accept it or not, that even if, and boy, I'm going to get burned for this, even if Miami World Center was to tell everybody in Overtown, come and get a job, the insiders know that many of these people are not prepared to even accept those jobs. So we have to do a lot more than just say, come get jobs. So therefore, there aren't enough personnel to fulfill all these jobs that are coming online. So we did stratify the process, and we started working our way out of Overtown. And we said, okay, then let's go to D5. Okay, let's go to other parts of low, high poverty areas, zip codes, and then we went to the county. So I thought that was one of the better parts of the agreement, but it's easy to criticize it because it sounds good to criticize, but when you realize that what we could not say is let's set aside 45 or 45% of jobs for African Americans, or let's set aside so many jobs for poor Hispanics. Then you're asking for a lawsuit. So what we did well, know what we did well. We didn't do everything well. We could have gotten more. Let me end on somewhere you started. And I'm going to read also a part of the Florida Redevelopment Act that you did not read. And I don't want you to think this is you and I, by the way, but you know, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer too. Okay? Florida Statute 163.335. Paren 5 says this, and this is very important because I hear people being misled about this Miami World Center deal and about TIF agreements. Let me tell you what the findings, and this is, I got my cheap glasses on tonight. The findings and declaration of necessity says in Paren 5, it is further found and declared that the preservation or enhancement of the tax base from which a taxing authority realizes tax revenues is essential. I'm going to move on. That the preservation and enhancement of such tax base is implicit in the purpose for which a taxing authority is established. That tax increment financing, that's what we did with the Miami World Center, tax increment finance is an effective method of achieving such preservation and enhancement in areas in which such tax base is declining. That community redevelopment in such areas, when complete, will enhance such tax base and provide increased tax revenues to all affected taxing authorities. What that meant to me was, if you offer a tax TIF agreement to a development or a developer like Miami World Center, first and foremost, if they don't build the project, they don't get the money. Okay? If they build the project, and they pay taxes, they get a rebate or a percentage of that money back. Yes, that is public money, because once it's in my pocket, even when I go to the casino, if it's in my pocket, it's in my pocket. Once I lose it, I lost my money. It is our money once we receive it. But when we give it back with the intent that the legislature told us, if you give it back to me, they increase the tax base. And on top of that, if we can get an economic incentive agreement, that's a win-win. Now, anybody can sit down and say, well, I could have negotiated a better agreement, but don't be led, and I'm not saying you said this, don't be led this is something was illegal or something improper. There's always better football players in the stand than the ones on the field, okay? In December, the meeting wasn't the most commendable meeting. It wasn't the most informative meeting. But I'll tell you again, Mr. Crespo,
yes,
right?
Mr.
The
Shriver.
deal almost failed. The distinction between the Miami deal and the CRA deal is simple. The city of Miami was, for the most part, approving the land use. We, the CRA, was asked about the tax financing, tax increment financing. Two different objectives. They were doing land use, zoning type deals. We were doing an economic incentive deal, trying to comply with the Florida statutes, trying to get something. If we wouldn't have gave them that deal, they would have built something, but it wouldn't have been this project. They probably would have built some condos.
Please.
Then we wouldn't have had probably the deal that we have with them. I'm not 100% speculating on this one. I was an insider. I was at the table. I understood and heard the arguments. The retail component, the Macy's, those guys were ready to walk. First and foremost, this project took too long. Second of all, you got a project down in Brickell. You got a project in the design district. And these developers were telling Macy's and Bloomingdale's, I don't even know why you're going in Overtown. We have better developments and a better profile for you. So these, and also the Macy's downtown have to close. So we were under some deadlines that we had to meet. Notwithstanding that, we got a deal. Whether you like it or not, do not allow anyone to tell you that we did something improper or we did something wrong. They can tell you, I would have done it better, and I may agree. But do not buy in to the CRA is being operated in an improper and illegal way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shriver. Since you lead our speaker at our regular meeting, we can continue from that point on. And now,
Well, one question I have is, you spoke about the ordinances that establish us. What recourse can be taken?
Speak up a little
speak up
bit.
so everybody can hear you.
You spoke about the ordinances that establish our board. What recourse can be taken for ordinance violations?
Well, I think that the reality of it is that you have the authority to request that the city manager comply with the requirements of the ordinance. And the only risk that you run is that they'll amend the ordinance and take away your authority. So you have to have the political support to do that. And I find it very interesting that when the ordinance was amended in 2006, it used to say that you had the oversight over city-funded or assisted activities, and they removed that.
Correct.
And so that means that the only other major activities in the redevelopment area for which you would be advising the city council would be the activities of developers that affected the CRA, the Overtown area, or even the CRA itself. Now, granted, and I've said this at the beginning, the CRA is a dependent special district of the city, a separate city entity. They wear separate hats. But obviously, the legislation was amended to give you the authority over more than just city projects. So maybe you're advising them, but The reality of it is you have the responsibility of reviewing anything that impacts the residents of Overtown. And I think that you have to talk individually with each of the elected officials before you go to the city manager.
So there is no recourse.
Well, it's a political process.
I for one should like to have access to this information that you have here.
Yes.
So we can educate ourselves on those
Yeah,
concerns. Have some clues as to what we should be doing before we go about trying to implement it. We need to know what we need to do.
Speak up so everyone can hear you.
We need to educate ourselves on these concerns. We need this information. I, for one, don't have it. And
I got it from Thoreau.
well, so we need to get that information.
It's actually on the city's webpage. I mean, the ordinance that we're talking about is 12858, and I downloaded it from the city's webpage, but it was amended on October 24th it was amended in 2006, and the strike-through version is on the webpage as well as the final version. But through Tyrone, you get everything.
Anybody have questions on the board?
Ms. Bell,
First, my name is Jackie Bell, and let me say to you, I thank you for being here. But the reason we have a CRA is this community is not done. Okay, we did this way back starting in 1970. We finally got the CRA in 1982, and it started, and the city of Miami got the first one. It started with the transit development, a transit grant for 4 blocks. If you go back, Mr. McKnight, and I can tell you, we've been here all along. We understand it. The Overtown Advisory Board was designated as the Oversight Management Team in 1982. Am I right, Mr. Schreiber?
You got it.
Okay, so it isn't, we don't know what CRA is. It was written in 1969 by state legislator Gwen Cherry. So we know we ain't, and the whole redevelopment plan that is happening now, we might not be a part of it, but 50% of the equity in every one of these projects was supposed to go back to the minority community because we had been left out of the major developments in the city of Miami. We know what, some of you all are new. Some of us been here all along, and we know. Okay, so the real truth of the matter is the amendment copy he's talking about happened under Commissioner Spence Jones, so they could keep you out of the process.
I had left the board at that time.
That's right.
They did
So the
have
whole
a meeting,
redevelopment plan that is happening happened because the people of this community knew how and what. The sad part is that the commissioners from our district do not carry out the plans that was happening prior to them arriving.
Amen.
Okay, and the people that we hire, they hire are people who are employees of government who have no commitment to communities. So it ain't we don't know, it's the fact that we've had a transition in the community. Okay, we have resolutions dating back to 1979 on how it should happen. Yes, the Black Archives got the lyrics theater because it's a historical site. It was not supposed to be tore down. The Dorsey House wasn't supposed to be tore down. The Ward House wasn't supposed to be tore down.
Sarah Stewart building.
The Stewart building was supposed to be. Okay, so
Colin Nip.
Colin Nip was supposed to be. So it's not like we don't know who we are. And it's not like this community was too ignorant to know. They have moved us away. Thank you.
3 years or so, the last commissioner kind of shut the board down. All these deals that were cut over the past 3 years when there was no oversight allowed, can we go back and make them revisit all that because the community had no input for 3 years?
You are an advisory body, you don't give any permits.
Correct.
And so your function is to advise, and so the remedy really has passed. And so that is the future that it does no good to look out the rearview mirror, because you do that, you're going to have a collision. The idea is to look out the front windshield and figure out where you're going to go. I mean, I was invited here because it was my understanding that the current members of the board had questions about the CRA. And I did not mean in any way to disparage the community's history or involvement. And I certainly do know that myself. But I came here as an invitation to educate the board, and I'm glad that we have large community participation in this. And I think that what I'm saying...
Sir, I want to have to ask you to get right to the end of your answer, please.
Yes.
We have a few minutes
The
left.
answer is that that you had no remedy for the period in which you...
Well, that's not a question I have. I understand this really well.
Okay.
Derek.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I just had a quick question, clarification of your process. You said that you wanted us to write down questions on paper, and I was wondering if anyone had papers to turn into you.
Oh, I would...
And whether or not those questions were going to be answered.
My intention was...
What I can suggest is that you turn the questions in. We'll give
And I'll answer
He'll
everyone.
answer them, he'll forward them to me, and we'll provide it to everyone. That's why it's very important that you please sign in the sign-in sheet, and I will follow up. If you've got an email address, I will follow up. If you don't have an email address, but you have an address, if we will have to forward that information to you.
And all questions will be answered generally without a response to the author of the question.
And I apologize, I failed to introduce myself also. I'm Anthony Brooks, retired from Dade County Public School System with 30 years. I was assistant principal at Jose De Diego Middle School. I frequent this area quite a bit because my interest is in empowering the children of this neighborhood to get involved and not just getting a job, but to have some corporate position or to be able to negotiate with those companies that are moving into this area so that they can be involved in building the facilities that are presently on the board.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
I have a quick question. How do we deal with the conflict of interest, whether it be both CRA and Oversight Board? How do we deal with it in a way where the community has some type of power and influence on what occurs in Overtown?
Define for me conflict of interest.
Let's say, for example, if someone is on the Oversight Board and they're looking for money from the CRA.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I would assume, based upon the fact that you're an appointed board, is that one of the responsibilities that you would have is you have to disclose and vote, because that's why you're appointed. But you have to disclose. Now, one of the other issues is, under the Miami-Dade County Ethics Code, the question is, under the Ethics Code, do you personally financially benefit from your action serving on a board, and is your decision-making authority on this board relevant to, do you influence, do you have the ability to influence or control the other aspects that might be deemed to be a conflict? Is it a conflict for an officer or director or staff employee of a charitable organization to sit on this board when that organization itself is applying for funding, grant funding, to an agency that this board makes recommendations about? The real question is, does the individual sitting on the board personally financially benefit, or is it their organization? And then the question is, there is a under the Miami-Dade County Code, Ethics Code, there is language that determines how you make that decision. But also there's the ethical question that the individual themselves may say is, do I sit on the board of this entity when in fact I'm seeking funding from so many organizations that we make written recommendations about? But the ethics code that you have in Miami-Dade County defines what is a conflict of interest, and sometimes it's not. It has to be tied to a direct financial interest of the person who would be sitting on the board.
Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we have to make that the last question. Howard, if you would please provide your questions and we can give it to Frank so that he can respond. He'll send them to me. If you would please fill out that sign-in sheet. I will make sure that you get all the information that we do not have. In particular, this information here, I'll scan it and make sure that it gets to everyone that has come. So I want to thank you very much. Chair,
You're taking a break from all this.
Chair,
Well, this is easy. I just record it and put it up. And then I get in arguments with Neil every once in a while.
You know you and I